Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Child Care Stabilization Grants Final Expense Reports informational session. We're so glad you could join us today to learn more about these expense reports. Here is our agenda for our session today. I'm going to do a little housekeeping. I'm then going to pass it over to John Benson from OCFS to get us kicked off. He's going to talk about the final expense reports. He'll talk about use of funds. We'll mention our upcoming sessions, and there will also be ample time for Q&A. So when it comes to housekeeping, just two things I wanted to share with you. One, we are recording today's session. We're doing 4 of these. We did 1 on Friday, 2 today, and 1 tomorrow. We'll post the best one to the stabilization website, and we'll also post the PowerPoint deck for you as well. Second piece of housekeeping is that lines are muted, but there is a Q&A box. We're reserving about half an hour or so tonight for your questions related to these expense reports. So put those questions into the Q&A box and we'll get through as many as we can. And now I'm going to pass it over to John Benson from OCFS.
Thank you, Piper. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for getting on tonight and being a part of this presentation. Just to introduce myself, as Piper said, I work for OCFS. I am a program manager here with the Division of Child Care Services, and helpful in the oversight of the different grant and funding opportunities that OCFS and the Division of Child Care has had the opportunity to push out over the last few years. Tonight's session is really just has 2 primary goals. One is to demonstrate a little bit of what the new and final expense report looks like to all of you, and to make sure that you have a familiarity with how to complete the expense report. But in addition to that, what we really want to do is to help you have a better understanding of being able to connect your already existing expenses to what you received in your award, in order to make sure that you're able to fully use the grant that was awarded to you by OCFS. The session is, like Piper mentioned, broken into 2 different parts. We have a few slides to go through with everyone. That'll take us about 20 minutes to get through. And then after that, we'll want to make sure that there's a lot of time to be able for all of you to ask us as many questions as you can or you have. Some of the questions are very specific to programs, and there are certain paths to it that it's very specific to not only your award, but to your program and to your license even perhaps. So it's really, if it gets so specific, I will recommend other resources to you, but in most cases, I think we'll be able to just answer just about everything that you have. So with that, we'll just jump right in. So about a week and a half ago, we launched the final expense report for both Stabilization 1 and for Stabilization 2, or it's also referred to as workforce support expenses. Stabilization 1, as you all may remember, was launched in the summer of 2021. It constituted 6 different payments over 6 months. And when your program completed it the following summer, we asked you to complete your first expense report. A few months later, or just a few months ago now, I should say, we released a second expense report for Stabilization 1, just to the programs that either had not already reported full use of their funds, or programs that haven't reported on the expense report to date. So that's an important feature to just remember for this entirety of this presentation, is that you received the invitation to this session, and also received that email notification the other day saying that you have an outstanding expense report that's now available to you, because to date, OCFS has issued you an award for either Stabilization 1 or for workforce support expenses. And the expense reports that you've completed haven't been reported the full use of the award yet. So that is to mean that if we issued $10,000 to your program, to date, either you haven't completed an expense report or you haven't reported the full use of the $10,000 yet. This is important to report the full use of the funds, or the use of funds that your program was able to accomplish, just because of not only federal reporting requirements, but also for us to have a good idea of who was able to successfully utilize those funds before the deadline had elapsed. On the screen right here, what you're going to see is there was 8 different spending categories for Stabilization 1. We're going to go over each one of them in some detail in a little while, but I also want to take a moment to say that a lot of the resources that we're going to cover in this presentation, and also in the questions and answers section, is information that's already available on our website. So in a few slides, we're going to show you an address where you can go to navigate to if anyone hasn't visited the OCFS website before. There is a section for the Division of Child Care Services, as well as within there is a section for the different grant opportunities that we have had over the last few years, including stabilization, child care deserts, even most recently workforce retention grant. There's information about all of them at any given time whenever you have the time to be able to go in and review. There's also links on how to gain specific technical assistance. So you can either contact your local child care resource and referral agency who has a person ready at every single one of them in order to assist the programs in their regions. There's also a 1-800 number to a helpline where it is staffed, I think, Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4:30. That has people ready to assist you with some simple questions. And if they're unable to, they can also help pass you to your CCR&R. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. Stabilization 2, was also called Workforce Support Expenses, was a grant that was deployed in the summer of 2022. It constituted of 2 payments to each program. Each payment had requirements that 75% of those payments had to be spent on supporting workforce expenses. So what that means is what's listed below is the bonuses or increase in wages, contributions towards health insurance costs, contributions towards staff retirement plans, and supplemental education advancement or tuition reimbursement. Those are examples of workforce support expenses. Now, I want to take a moment just to make sure that it's clear that 75% of those payments were to be meant for these 4 listed here. And when we talk about increase in wages, is that if you had been paying the employees minimum wage, and then you decided in order to make it more competitive that you were going to increase their wage by $2 to $3 or whatever the case was. That increase in wage of $2 to $3 is an eligible expense underneath the 75% reporting. The other wage that you had already been paying, so in this example, the minimum wage, would be covered under the 25% of remaining funds can be used for, as well as your Stabilization 1 funds could have been used for those existing payroll expenses. And with that, we're going to click to the next slide. So again, the final expense report was made available to programs that had participated in either Stabilization 1 or Stabilization 2 workforce support expenses. It is possible that your program has outstanding reports for both, and in a few slides, we're going to go over exactly how you can determine whether or not that applies to you. Now, before we go any further, I do want to call out the fact that last Thursday, when we sent out the notification for these sessions, as well as the notification to you that your program has an outstanding expense report, there was a miscalculation on the programs that actually should have received that email notification. So the email did go to more programs than we had originally targeted it towards. So it is possible that you are on this session a little bit confused over why you're being told that you didn't report 100% when you thought you had. We're going to talk in a moment or two of exactly how you can go to your own funding request and be able to determine whether or not you do, in fact, owe any expense reports. But before we get there, I'll tell you right away that the best way to do so is to log into your funding request using the OCFS website, where you'll sign into your mynewyork.gov account. From there, you'll navigate to your grant portal, which many of you are already familiar with. That's where you've completed your previous expense reports. And from there, you'll see on the action items list on the right-hand side. If there is any expense report that is currently due, it'll be listed on that right-hand side. If there is no expense report due, or no expense report icon listed under those action items, then your program does not have any outstanding expense reports. I also want to call out for the programs that there are sometimes several license numbers under one entity type. So if the business representative for those programs are all the same person, I think it's really important to make sure that you go to all of the programs that you applied on and make sure that you log into each and check those action items for each of your programs. With that, we can go to the next slide. So we're going to cover the use of funds. So this is a really big, important part. That's why we put it in bold on here, but I'm going to say it now, but I'm also going to reiterate it a few times during this presentation. It's very important to remember that you were able to use the options for use of funds covered a very large amount of time, over a year and a half, as it is right here. So January 31st, 2020, all the way until September 30th, 2023. That means that any of the expenses that you incurred that were covered under the slides we're about to cover are eligible for stabilization funds. Now, as you all recall, that you received the funds in the beginning in the summer of 2021, and in most cases didn't completely receive all of your awards until the early spring of 2022. But you were still able to use those funds for eligible expenses backing up to January 31st, 2020. The way you were able to do so was by maintaining proof that that's how you use those funds. So we're going to get into, we can go to the next slide for a great example of it. So personnel costs, payroll, and salaries and benefits. Now, we all know that this is one of the largest costs of providing care, that this is how we're paying our employees, this is how we're paying our assistants, this is how we're paying ourselves. It's one of the largest sources of where the operational costs of burdens go. All of those personnel costs are covered under Stabilization 1, as well as the 25% of Stabilization 2 for workforce support expenses. And again, going back to January 2020, all the way through to September 2023, if you have a payroll records throughout those time periods, you're able to keep those payroll records and you can identify that those payrolls were made using stabilization funds. There's specific subtypes underneath it, as we can all just read here, all those check marks off. But like Piper mentioned, that this presentation is going to be recorded and posted, as well as the slides that we're using are going to be posted. So I don't want to waste everyone's time of reading these exactly, but if you can always go back to it when you'd like to, as well as these have already been listed on our website, and as well as within the solicitation of interest or the statement of grant opportunity that is still posted on our website and will be there in perpetuity. Move to the next slide. The second largest use of funds that we can imagine would be rent or mortgage payments. Now, again, your program can go and backdate the expenses all the way till January 2020 up until September 30th, 2023. So if you have receipts of paying rent, mortgage, utilities, or facilities, or anything other on this list here, those are all eligible expenses, again, for the entirety of the Stabilization 1 grant, but the 25%, up to 25% of your workforce support expenses grant money that you received. The way that your program uses those funds is completely at your discretion for Stabilization 1 specifically, and again for that 25% for workforce support. So if you wanted to use the entirety of your Stabilization grant to be able to pay for your payroll, you can do that. If you want to use all 100% of it for your rent, you can do that as well. The only restrictions come in is for workforce support expenses, and that is capped at, again, the 25% of each payment. All right, with that, we're going to go to the next slide. This one's for facility maintenance and improvements, another large source of money that was likely used during the pandemic in order to create more safe space for the children in care. But any of these areas here on the green check marks are eligible expenses. The only prohibitive part was on major structural changes. So we're talking major construction, such as extension of the facility or what's listed here. Those major improvements were not allowed to be a part of the funding opportunity, but small improvements or replacing small equipment within the program was eligible. We can go to the next slide. Personal protective equipment, cleaning and sanitation supplies, and services or training. That's fairly self-explanatory, so we'll just keep on going to the next one. Purchases of or updates to equipment and supplies to respond to COVID-19. Again, this is equipment and supplies, but again, the list is right there, and is at your convenience. These slides will be available for you to review. Let's go to the next one. Goods and services necessary to maintain or resume child care services. These are listed out in front of us under goods, services, and fees. I also want to take a pause here just to, again, call out the great resources that reside within your local CCR&R, or the Child Care Resource and Referral Agencies. We've partnered with the CCR&Rs throughout the past few years in order to really help get the child care community immediate technical assistance or answers to their questions in a really personable way. So there's a person at every single one of the agencies that's there to help answer any of your questions that you have about this grant or any of the others that you're participating in. So if you're not sure about, which expenses or the things that I've just discussed here, you're not sure how it applies to your program. I've had the same exact discussion with the CCR&Rs last week in order to help them prepare for offering you technical assistance. So they are all ready and waiting for your calls, and if you need assistance, they're there for you. I also want to make sure that that's clear that the CCRNRs meet with OCFS on a weekly basis just to talk about any new and updates around the grants and the funding opportunities and new opportunities to be able to be of assistance to the child care community. And with that, we can go to the next slide. I'm sorry, professional development related to health and safety practices. Again, this is to do with training in order to help promote your workforce. All the subcategories are listed here, but again, are on our website. We can move to the next slide. Finally, mental health supports for children and employees, exactly as it is. This is not the last eighth and final category for allowable spending under Stabilization 1, and also for the up to 25% of your Stabilization 2 or workforce support expenses grant. We'll go to the next. So now we're going to move into exactly how you're able to complete the expense reports as they're available to you. And also, if you're not sure if you owe an expense report, this is following the same path. So first thing you're going to do is navigate to the OCFS website, which the web link is right there, but we can also pop it into chat for anyone to copy, and then or they can click on it themselves and go right to our website. Once you're at our website, you're going to navigate towards, if you're not already in the Division of Child Care Services, to Child Care Services to your funding opportunities page, and then you're going to click on. I'm sorry, Piper, please go back one. Thank you. And you're going to click on that red box right there where it says View My Application. Once you click on View My Application, you're going to be moved to the NewYork.gov sign-in area that you all would have had to have established a NewYork.gov account in order to have applied for any of the recent OCFS grants or funding opportunities. So using the same credentials that you've had before, you sign into that MyNewYork.gov, and then the next window will pop up. Next. What you'll see is this is the opportunity for you to select which grant that you're trying to access at that time. So if you're a program participated in the original Stabilization 1 grant, so this was back in the summer of 2021, and then received the two, or either just the Stabilization grant of 6 payments, or 6 payments, and then your program also received those 2 other workforce support expenses, you're going to go through the Child Care Stabilization grant portal for both of those funding opportunities because your program participated in both. You go into Child Care Stabilization grant. If you just participated in the original Stabilization grant, that's also your window. The only time that you would apply you would go in under the second box there for Child Care Stabilization 2 for workforce supports is if the only grant that your program received was for those workforce support expenses. Those 2 payments. That's when you would go in through that entryway there. I know sometimes people think that they, because they did both, they should go into both. But if you have those original 6, you go through the first portal no matter what, and all of your outstanding expense reports will become available to you. The only time you would only go for the second one is, again, only if you have just those final 2 payments or those other 2 workforce support expenses that we released in the summer of 2022. All right, we can move to the next slide. Once you click on that box, whichever one's applicable to you, you navigate. This is the next page that'll pop up for you. What you'll go is go over to the right-hand side under Choose an Existing Application. I'm told that arrow doesn't work that well, but if you click on the open space underneath Choose an Existing Application, that you'll click on that, and then your program's name should pop right up. You click on that on your program's name, and then you hit Next. And that brings you to this page. Now, this is the page that I was mentioning a little bit earlier, where you'll see information specific to your program, as well as like the funding program that it pertains to, the specific application ID that is just for your program, as well as the current status and some other information. This is also where you can download a copy of your application, see disbursement details and other things. But the most important thing of why we're here is those 2 things that are circled in that red box right there. So this is a great example of a program that has outstanding expenses for both Stabilization 1, so those original 6 payments, and Stabilization 2 for workforce support expenses, or those final 2 payments that we released last summer. What the person would have to do if they were overseeing this program would be complete both of those expense reports, because remember, these are 2 separate grant opportunities, so we have a requirement to report out on use of funds for both. And there are some differences between the two, but the larger ones are the ones that we're going to be walking through in the next few slides, is how exactly to complete those reports. So this is for Stabilization 1. Once you click on that link that was available underneath your actions, this is what will pop up. There's a quick instructions page, followed up by grant spending, certifications, and certifications and attestations. And we're going to go through them all. In order to navigate to the next page from here, what you'll do is you'll click on the answer to the question of, are you currently open and providing care to children? You'll select any of those answers below and then hit the next button. That'll bring you to this page. With this page is showing you what your program has already reported as being spent in previous expense reports. So in those other expense reports that you've likely already done, you've already reported out some use of the funds, whether it be under PPE, rent, or facility maintenance, like in this example here. In any case, whether you've done one expense report or two, or even in some cases 3 already for workforce support expenses. All of those entries that you've already completed have been aggregated into this final report, and it's going to show you up to now what you've already reported. And then and then you'll hit next, which will show you this screen, which is under new spending. What it's going to show you is there's a few columns over here to your left that I want to draw your attention to. The first one is the category. So that's going to tell you that out of the 8 spending categories, what category the spending that you're about to claim is under. So if we were to use this example of PPE, cleaning and other safety, the reported expenses for this program, they haven't reported any yet. It's a $0 that's there. If they had reported any PPE, cleaning, or other health and safety expenses to date, that would have shown in that column underneath reported expenses. To the right of that is the new expenses. And right now it's set to default at 0 because the person who's completing this report has not entered any new values as of yet. What you're going to do if you want to change that, so if now you're saying, you know, well, about 2 years ago, I did buy a new washing machine to help with laundering the kids' clothes. So I'm going to claim that now because I still have the receipt. So you would go to this area, you would hit that down arrow, and then click the edit button. Once you click that edit button, the window that's on your right-hand side there will pop up and it will show to you. What it's going to do is it's going to show you the category that you've selected, as well as the already reported expenses that are not editable. So we cannot go back and change any expenses that you've already completed from the previous expense reports. This is only for new expenses that you're talking or reporting on now. So in the event that we're going to continue with the washing machine that we just mentioned, you would enter in what was that new expense. So say it was a $500 washing machine. You punch in that $500 right there under new expenses, and then in the expense description, you would say new washing machine. And then under records description, it would be whatever record that you're maintaining. And again, all programs are required to maintain records of use of funds for up to 5 years after they've received the stabilization funds. So in this case, I would write store receipt. And then I would hit save. And then when you go back, after you save, that window will close and it'll show you this column has now been updated, and it'll show you that new expenses 500, and it'll show you expense description, washing machine description, and records description, store receipt. And then you can roll down to your next one under rent and utilities. The final part of that window is it's going to show you, it's going to start to calculate what you have entered during the expense reporting. So if your program has gone through and it's tallied up all of your previously reported expenses, as well as any new expenses that you're reporting during this form, it's going to tally that up together and it's going to tell you what your total expenses are. So in this case, this program has reported $3,985.54 so far, but they received $4,216.17 from whatever grant that this was issued under. So it's telling them that right now you have not reported the use of $230.63. Because there's we're going to call it underreporting, this error message is going to pop up for you. It's going to tell you that the total reported expenses does not match your total awarded amount. And if you have additional fund use to report now, you still can do so by editing the lines above. Now, what that's telling you is that it wants you to pay attention to the fact that you haven't reported the full use of your award, and they're still trying to do so right now. You haven't submitted this expense report, so if you want to take a moment, you can hit previous, and all the entries that you've had up to that point will save. And then this is a great time that you can call your local CCR&R and say, you know, I still have $230 to spend, but I'm not sure how I can claim it. And they can try to help talk you through all those eligible expenses and how you may have receipts that shows how you did spend those funds to operate your childcare during those timelines of, again, from January 2020 all the way until September 30th, 2023. And then, but if after that you're still sure that I still have $230.63, you would hit next and continue. I also want to say really quickly, though, that there is logic within this that won't allow you to over-report. So if in this example, the program had reported $5,000 of expenses, a different error message will pop up to say that you have reported an amount that exceeds the awarded, you reported an amount that exceeds the award. And yet, in that case, you would have to go back up to the areas that you've already filled in, some new expenses, and get it back down underneath that $4,216.17. The maximum value would be $4,216.17. That's our goal for you, is that you did and were able to utilize all of the funds that we issued. But again, in the chance that you just weren't able to, at this point, you would hit next, and then the next screen will come, which is our attestation page. So all of these statements are ones that you've already agreed to throughout the duration of the grant, but it's to recertify that these statements are true and that you spent the funds under allowable expenses. And at the very end, there's one more logic test that will come through. And this is it. So if, again, you go to submit the expense report and it's showing you again that you received $4,216.67, and up to now you have reported $1,000 worth of use, which leaves $3,216.67 unreported. And then it tells you that any unreported funds are obligated to be returned. So please take the time to go back to the previous page and submit any additional expenses that you have incurred. You can also contact your local CCR&R for help in claiming the full award. Again, our hope is that you were able to utilize the funds during the allowable time frame, which again is January 2020 all the way through September 30th, 2023. If you're not sure how you did, or you're not sure about the spending categories, you can always call your CCR&R who can help. But if ultimately you're not able to claim the funds, you would click that box that says, by clicking this checkbox, you are acknowledging that you have completed your expense reports and will be responsible for returning any remaining funds. If you have a balance of $0, you do not need to take any further action. You click that box and you hit save, and then at that point, the final expense report has been submitted. Now, I want to mention really quickly, so like there will be a recoupment effort that the office will be undertaking shortly after the deadline to complete these expense reports. We also want to make it clear that our hope is that you and your programs were able to use all of the funds. So we want to make sure there's a lot of resources that will help you understand how those funds were likely already used. And it's just a matter of assistance and helping you maintain the necessary proof and receipts that you use the funds. We can go to the next slide. So we're going to go through some quick common payment questions for use of funding. Actually, before we do this, I want to call out really quickly. So just for the expediency of time, we only went through Stabilization 1's expense report walkthrough. But I want to say that the Stabilization 2 workforce support expenses walkthrough is exactly the same functionality as this. It has the same error codes and it has the same sort of logic as it'll tell you what you've already reported, and it'll also, and using the same functionality, allow you to add additional funds. There's already some resources on our website on how to complete those expense reports, but if you're not sure how to do it, you can always contact your local CCR&R who can help. All right, so with that, one of the questions that we get frequently is, will I have to provide receipts of documentation of how the funds were spent? The answer to that is yes. The federal regulations that we are adhering to as well is that we're required federal regulations require all recipients of federal funds to keep financial documents for 5 years after having received a stabilization grant. So what that means is all those receipts, those payrolls, those mortgage payment transactions, or whatever the case is that you have in order to prove the use of funds, you're required to keep for up to 5 years in case you were ever selected for an audit or review. You go to the next. What do I do if I didn't spend all my funds? Well, the first thing we want you to do is to reach out to your local CCR&R to review your expense categories and also your receipts that you've incurred over the last almost 3 full years. Because at that point, like, you might be able to help identify where you actually have spent those funds. But if ultimately you were unable to find the categories and you have unspent funds, you would just report those in the final expense report that's been made available to you. And then by submitting that expense report with the underutilized funds or underreported funds, you've also reported to OCFS the dollar amount that we would need to seek to recoup in the near future. And when you're contacted by OCFS, there'll be instructions on exactly how to return those payments. Another common question is, can we backdate eligible expenses? The answer is no, but you can go through old receipts and see if any expenses you made were eligible to be paid by Stabilization 1, or workforce support funds. So what I want to be clear about with that is that, so, we have had the question of, I didn't know how I could just issue my bonuses to all of my staff in order to use workforce support. So can I issue them today? Well, unfortunately, the answer to that is no, because today is October 23rd, and the federal guidance that we received is that those funds had to be liquidated by September 30th, 2023. So there is no possibility for to be able to use those funds post that date. However, again, there is a lot of resources out there that will help show you how likely you have been using those funds throughout the grant period. It's about understanding and document retention as far as being able to show proof of payment or proof of use. Then go to the next slide. I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly because I know we're running out of time. So we have one more session. Oh, we are here at the end. That's great, Piper. So we have one more session. That's tomorrow at 1 o'clock. It will be me again, but you're happy. I'm happy to have the company. If you want to come in and listen to this presentation again, I'd be happy to have you. It'll be following the same slides. And like Piper mentioned earlier today, or earlier this session, we're going to be recording this and posting it on the website in the near future. We're also going to be posting these slides in addition, as well as a lot of the information that, if you, again, have specific questions that I wasn't able to get to, you can contact your local CCR&R. That you can call that helpline, or you can visit our website that has a lot of different resources on how to complete these reports. And with that, I want to start taking some questions.
Fantastic, John. I think you know what I'm going to ask you to repeat, because this is our third session. I've asked
Yep.
you to repeat it. There you go.
Yep, absolutely. So we've had a few people join the session a little bit later. So I want to make sure that one of the points that I touched on earlier, I reiterate, is so we on last Thursday, when we sent out that email notification to programs saying that you are been identified as a person who hasn't reported all of their funds or haven't or to date haven't reported any of their funds, there was a slight miscalculation on who the target audience was. So more people got that email than we had intended. So it is possible that you have already reported 100% use of funds for both your Stabilization 1 and for your workforce support expenses, and you received that email in error. We are working today and again tomorrow to try to narrow down exactly who got it that shouldn't have gotten it, and we're going to be sending you another email just apologizing for the mistake and for the confusion. But in the meantime, what I recommend you do is you go navigate to your grant portal, where you'll be able to log in and you can see which your program, by following the same instructions we were talking about earlier on how to go into view my application, log in using your newyork.gov, navigating to that tile that shows you information specifically about your program. And if you look over to the right-hand side underneath actions, it'll have an outstanding expense report there or not. That's it right there. So if you don't see any expense reports listed under your actions, that means you don't have any expense reports due. And if you, just to reiterate again, so this is, it's important to know which application portal you'll go through. So if you receive the original 6 payments for child care stabilization, you would go through that child care stabilization grant portal. If you only receive those 2 payments for workforce support expenses, and I hate to say only because they were substantial as well, but I'm just using it for the idea of saying that there were 6 payments connected to stabilization and 2 payments of workforce support expenses. And many of our child care programs were able to participate in both grants, so they received 8 payments. But if your program received just the 2 for workforce support expenses, you would only go through that child care stabilization 2 for workforce support and then that's where you would access your application. But if your program received both the original 6 for stabilization and the 2 for workforce supports, you would go to Child Care Stabilization Grant for both of those expense reports. And that's how you'll be able to determine if you are have satisfied all reporting requirements to date.
Wonderful, John. You answered a bunch of questions with that one. We had some confusion as people said they already did the expense reports and they said, how would they know? So that answered a bulk of our questions today, which is great. What else do we have here? We had some folks asking if they could print out their submitted final expense report. We know that that's not possible now, but OCFS is looking into that as an enhancement maybe for future grants.
That's true. So what we're working on right now is, well, there's 2 things I want to say. We have gotten some questions from folks on how do I know what I've already reported? And the answer to that is if you if the final expense report is due for you now, it's going to show you what you've already reported. So it'll show you the dollar amount of whatever it is you've already done. So if you've already, in the first expense report, you reported $5,000 in use and rent, and then the second expense report, you reported an additional $5,000. This latest report is going to show you that you reported $10,000 in rent, in the rent category. That's the best way for you to know what you've already reported. As Piper mentioned, we are looking to be able to update the system because we've gotten some requests to be able to see expense reports in the near future, but that functionality will not be ready before this expense report is due. Which I do want to say quickly because we might have gotten over that slide really quickly. So I'll say it now. Is just so that expense report was made available again about a week and a half ago. We invited you to these sessions just last week, but it has been available for a week before that. And the expectation is that those reports are due as soon as they are made available to the programs that they are connected to. The other expectation is that we would like these expense reports completed by no later than October 31st, 2023. So to give you just about a week to do it from now. Our intention would be is once expense reports are being completed, we'll have an idea of which programs have not been able to use their expenses, and then we'll begin our recruitment efforts. For the programs that fail to complete any expense reports, we will be treating the entire award amount as needing to be recouped. So it's very important to access your stabilization account and to make sure that you have completed all of the expense reports that are necessary in order to not get a recoupment letter from the state in the near future.
Great. Thank you for that, John. Let's see, what else do we have here? Is there a way to fix something? Is there a way to fix a mistake on something that has already been reported? That was another common question this evening.
Yes. So, but I want to I'll draw a little bit of clarity to that. So there is a difference between I'd like to change what I reported versus what I reported was a mistake. So for example, we have seen programs who accidentally clicked on the wrong line and then they entered, $5,000 for rent and rent stubs as their documentation source, but then saved it underneath the PPE section. That's a mistake. That was an error, and we have the ability to correct that with your assistance. The best way to do that is to contact your local CCR&R and alert them that the error was made, and they can contact the office, and we will engage to do so. It'll take a few days to do it, but we'll get it done for you. But I want to make sure it's clear that if what's already been reported has been used, so barring an example of a mistake, what's already been reported, the office has already been using to report to our federal partners on what the use of funds have been to date. So those are not changeable. We've also been asked questions about if in my original application I said I would use it for A and B, but I never ended up using any. I never ended up buying anything from A and B. Am I allowed to use it for other categories? The answer to that is yes. So in the grant application, we ask you what you anticipate using the stabilization grant funds for, but you are not obligated to stay to those identified areas. You are free to use the spending under any of those 8 categories throughout the grant period, which again was January 2020 all the way through September 30th, 2023.
Great. Thank you so much, John. Um,
Absolutely.
Questions about not being able to edit the first disbursement expense report. So when you go in, I'll show you this. You know what? I will navigate there, John, while you talk about it. How about that? I'm not so good at doing both at once.
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry, Piper. What was the question?
Oh, no problem. Somebody noted that they were unable to edit their first disbursement expense report. So the first expense report.
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by edit. So if you go to just the next slide there, Piper. Um, so you wouldn't be able to edit what the reported expenses already were. That area is grayed out. Like if you see in the right-hand window there, the category and reported expense lines, so PPE, cleaning, and other health and safety, as well as the $0 under reported expenses, those are both grayed out, which means you cannot edit those two areas because those are coming from a historical document, not what you're currently adding in. But if you're talking about you're unable to edit that new expense line, that is not the way that it's designed. So that would be just reporting that the system isn't working for you as you would expect it to your local CCR&R, and they can help you try to troubleshoot it. And if they're not able to, they know how to get in contact with us here at OCFS, who can help navigate the issue for you. But you should be able to add those additional expenses. I do actually want to call out one thing to do with specifically for workforce support expenses. So for the stabilization 2, those 2 payments for workforce support expenses, is that it is possible that your program has already reported out all the use of funds for the first payment and not necessarily your second payment. So in your first payment, you might be trying to add on there, but you're already at 100% of that use. So it would try to just move you on to the next second payment where you hadn't reported a full use of those yet. You should see the error code at the bottom of the page that says that you have reported more than you were awarded, and it'll ask you to bring it back down to that that no more than 100% of your award amount value. But if that's not what's causing the trouble for you, then I just recommend you contact your CCR&R, who again can offer some troubleshooting and technical assistance. But if ultimately they're unable to, they can get in contact with OCFS, who can help.
Great. Thank you so much, John. We have some very specific instances too, which we're not going to address today. We do recommend that if you've got a very specific instance that you do reach out to your local CC&R, and as John noted, they can escalate that to OCFS if needed.
Yes, and I wanted to take the time to clarify that too. It's good, and it's not that we're more than happy to help, and we're able to answer a lot of different questions. But the fear that I have is that if I answer your very specific question, it can end up causing a lot of confusion for other programs. And that question might be very specific to your program, your license, your award, the dollar amount, and there might be very specific set of circumstances that are only impacting you. And I wouldn't want to confuse the majority of the programs by trying to answer your one specific question. So again, Piper called it out correctly. Contact your CCR&R, who will answer it for you. And if they're unable to answer it for you, they'll get it to me or my team, and we'll answer it for you.
Great. Thank you so much, John. Another question that we seem to be getting on every single one of these has to do with workforce supports. So the second workforce supports has to do with the Stabilization 2.0.
The 75%?
The 75%, and
Yeah.
they're wondering, this is a question from Jing at 708. They say they've raised their staff's wages and want to know if that counts as the 75%.
So that's a great call out, and thank you for raising the question. So the difference that is able to be claimed under the 75% for workforce support would be additional payroll expenses. So if you had your employees and they were all working at minimum wage, and then you decided to increase all of their wages by, say, $3, that additional cost of $3 per employee is eligible for the workforce support expenses portion, that 75% portion. The whole of that person's salary would not be eligible for that expense, though. So, I'm trying to also think of like single point of bonuses. So like if you issued your employees, one-time bonuses or sign-on bonuses or retention bonuses, or whatever the case was, throughout that entirety of the, again, January 2020 all the way to September 30th, 2023, those are eligible expenses. So it's additional workforce pay or payroll. It would also be for additional bonuses that are not typically part of your program. So again, it's the difference between what their new wage is and what their wage was is what is eligible for workforce support expenses, not the entire payroll.
Fantastic, John. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
All right. Okay, so another question since we're talking about this. Ritzy asks at 7:15, can rent be reported at 100%? I'm guessing that they're
Yes.
asking for the first uh, for the stabilization
Yep.
1.0.
That's right. So yes, the answer is yes to that. So for stabilization, you're able to your entire rent or mortgage obligation is eligible under stabilization 1, and for up to 25% of your workforce support expenses payments. So those are the two areas that you'd be able to claim. You wouldn't be able to claim your rent under the 75% for workforce support expenses, but you would be able to for all of stabilization 1, and again that 25% for operating expenses under workforce support expenses.
Great. And our next question also has to do with expenses. I brought you to this slide. So Ralph asks at 7:17, so January 20th, 2020, or January 31st, 2020 to September 30th, is that for stabilization 2.0 spending and stabilization 1.0 spending?
That's right. So stabilization 1 and stabilization 2 use the same two time frames. So it's January 31st, 2020, all the way to September 30th, 2023.
All right, let's see what else we have in here. Um, I think we've covered. Oh, somebody's asking about taxes. Any way to write off the taxes we paid because of the increased income? I believe there was another similar question to that. What would be your advice, John, in that instance?
I actually don't, I wasn't prepared to answer that question, so I don't have that in front of me. So what I would say is that for that question, if you could just send it to your CCR&R, and they may have materials on that already, and if not, they'll get it to me and I'll get you the answer.
Wonderful. And then we did have another common question that keeps coming up on these sessions is what happens if you have a program that has closed, in the last couple of months? I think you are working on guidance for that, right, John, from OCFS, and more to
I
come on
am.
that?
Yep. So the closed programs that receive stabilization funds are still required to report out on the use of those funds that they had prior to closing. So the people who had originally applied for the grant still maintain access to the grant portal, even if the program has closed. If you're having any trouble with accessing the application, or if it's the person who had applied on the program's behalf is no longer working for you, like the situation where your director applied, but they're no longer working for you as the owner, you can contact your local CCR&R and let them know, and then OCFS will be issuing guidance very soon about that exact scenario.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. And I did put the
Yeah.
link for the CCR&Rs in the chat at some point, so you can check that out. Or you can always just go to the OCFS website and search for CCR&R, and it comes up very easily. I do that a lot myself.
Very good.
Fantastic. For workforce 2, question came in at 7:20. Do you need to spend everything by September 30th, 2022? Yes, you do. That's when you
2023.
2023,
I'm sorry.
excuse me, 2022. Thank you, John. 2023.
Yep.
So like you see up here on this screen, your funds must have been spent by then. And if you are having difficulty, as John mentioned, trying to figure out what is eligible, to reach out to your CCRNR, as John has been reiterating throughout tonight's session. They are a wealth of information and they can assist you in going through your receipts and picking out things that are eligible for for the workforce grant or stabilization 1.0. Amy says at 7:21 that there is no arrow for the second disbursement. So let me go back to that
Okay.
screen.
If you don't see an arrow, that's not what we would expect. We do often recommend that folks try to use either Google Chrome for the software when they're trying to access the application. I mean, it's accessible in many of the different software or Internet Explorers, but the most stable that we have seen is with Google Chrome. We also recommend clearing your cache. Could be causing some weird bugs and issues. But otherwise, if you try those different things and it's still not working, I would just recommend calling your local CCRNR who can offer you technical assistance, because they also have the ability that if they're unable to answer your question or help troubleshoot your issue or error, they get it to us in OCFS really quickly, and we can do a deep dive on exactly what's happening with your application specifically.
All right. Another question too from Tracy at 7:22. Tracy wants to know if they are going to expense those employee bonuses, where should those go? Under what category?
So the categories that we have up here right now are the 8 spending categories under other so for the stabilization 2, it's 25% of the operating expenses, and for stabilization 1, it would be 100% of the award. For the 75% of the award that you have for workforce support expenses, if you just go to the next slide, I'm sorry. So those 4 bullets that you see right there, bonuses or increase in wages, contributions toward health insurance, those are the same 4 categories that you're going to see in your workforce support expenses expense report. So you would click on the category for bonuses or increase in wages at that point, and then you would enter in the dollar amount that you issued the bonuses, and then you would the records description of what you have that would prove that if you were ever selected for audit or review. You can also give a bonus for stabilization 1. I see that question. It'd be under the same area, so you could use it just for payroll expenses is where you would enter that. I'm sorry, everyone. The question was, I gave a bonus with stabilization 1.0, and my answer is you can enter that into the first category. You're very welcome.
All right. Any other questions out there this evening? We've had a lively bunch. I know it's late-ish in the evening, but we do appreciate you joining us tonight. So we'll give it a last call for any remaining questions. And I will put up the website just in case you didn't see it. Oops, let me get back there. There we go. There are some resources on here. Additionally, this is where you will go to to access that expense report too. So if you go to this website and click View My Application, you'll then log in using your my.ny username and password. Oh, at 7:07, Bonnie says there was a question. Let me check that one out. Thanks, Bonnie. And John, you get there
I'm
first.
pulling here. Oh, so Bonnie, your question was that you had just received a check for your retention grant last week. So how long do I have to spend it? So this specific demonstration and slides are about the stabilization grant for stabilization 1, and also for your workforce support expenses. The recently released, and I apologize, the names actually are really quite close. The workforce retention grant that we just launched over this past summer, there is no current expense report due for them. That we're expecting that to begin in around December. And the timelines for when you have to spend that grant is also lined out within the SOI. But I don't want to take everyone's time on this. But if you have any other questions, you can also contact your local CCRNR about that, because those same staff that are ready to help with stabilization are also fully briefed on how to help with the workforce retention grant as well.
Okay, and Kay has a question that came in at 7:25 saying they have not been able to complete their expense report, and they need this for the workforce retention grant that you were just talking about. Should Kay reach out to their local CCR&R, John?
Where was that question? I'm sorry.
It just came in at 7:25. So Kay has not been able to complete their expense report. It just sort of disappeared on them. Um, and
Uh-huh.
they may have hit something mistakenly. But they in order but so wondering what they should do in that instance.
Sure. So if you think you should have the expense report, but it's not showing for you, the best thing to do is to contact, again, your local CCR&R who can get some information with you and try to troubleshoot it a little bit. And again, if they're unable to do so, they have a direct path to OCFS that can help. We may reach out to you directly from us and try to help with resolving that. I do see a question on the workforce retention grant, and that grant has closed. So that grant closed last month. And if you weren't able to apply, then that period has gone past. All right, I see one more. Oh, I see it now. All right, so really quickly for the last minute, I have everyone here. So I just want to again reiterate that our hope is that all the programs that participated within Stabilization 1 and for workforce support expenses is able to identify how they use those funds over that very long time period again. So I want to reiterate, all the way from effectively, January 2020 all the way through September 2023. So a lot of programs incur a lot of expenses during all of that time period, and a lot of those expenses are eligible for use of funds underneath the stabilization grant. So it's really just important to try to go back through and try to see the expenses that you incurred and the receipts that you have in order to demonstrate that, and then report those funds up to the full is our hope. If you're having trouble with identifying where to find those or how to report those or how to record them, the best thing to do is to call your CCR&R and just say you need some help, and they have people who are more than eager to try to help you do so. Again, the expense report is due by October 31st, 2023. After that, shortly after that, OCFS will begin our recoupment process for the funds that were identified by the providers as having not been spent within the time frame that the statement of grant opportunity allowed, which is all the way until September 30th, 2023. With that, Piper, I thank you very much for hosting us tonight, and I thank you all for jumping on this call and getting this information. Again, we have one more session scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, but if you need more information, again, there's the website that's posted on the screen right now, as well as there's a 1-800 number where you can call a phone operator who can help you answer many of your questions, and ultimately also connect you with a CCR&R who can help, which is a great resource as well for you. As your local child care resource and referral agencies have been wonderful assets to OCFS, as we've developed and implemented all these grants over the last few years, and they're definitely ready to help you with any questions that you have. And with that, I thank you all very much, and I hope you have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.